Pay attention to this camera footage. At 11:47 p.m. on September 14, 2019, a parking lot security camera outside the Riverside Plaza shopping center in Jacksonville, Florida captured something that would change two lives forever. The grainy black and white footage shows a silver sedan pulling into space 34B. The driver's door opens. A woman steps out, her figure illuminated by the overhead sodium lights. She walks toward the entrance of a 24-hour convenience store, her shadow stretching long across the pavement. But watch what happens next. At 11:48 p.m. she stops, bends down, picks something up from the ground near a storm drain. She holds it up to the light, turns it over in her hands. It's a phone. An iPhone 11 Pro Max rose gold. Custom case with initials engraved on the back PTV. The woman, later identified as 32-year-old Nicole Brennan, a dental hygienist and single mother of two, would later tell police she thought someone had simply dropped their phone. She looked around. The parking lot was empty except for two other vehicles parked far from where she stood. She waited 5 minutes. No one came back. At 11:53 p.m., the camera shows Nicole walking into the store, the phone still in her hand. What no one realized, including Nicole, was that this phone didn't belong to just anyone. It belonged to Peter Tyrell Vincent, a 29-year-old construction contractor, father of one, and beloved son to Diane Vincent of Jacksonville's Northside District. And by the time Nicole picked up that phone, Peter had already been dead for 47 minutes. Peter Vincent wasn't supposed to die that night. Born on March 3, 1990, Peter grew up in Jacksonville's tightly knit Brentwood neighborhood. He was the youngest of 3 children, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse to keep the family afloat. Friends described him as loyal, hardworking, and someone who would give you the shirt off your back. By 2019, Peter had built a modest but successful contracting business. He employed 6 people, mostly friends from the neighborhood, and had recently secured a $180,000 contract to renovate a commercial property in downtown Jacksonville. But that success came with complications. On August 21, 2019, Peter received a wire transfer of $85,000, the first installment for the downtown project. According to bank records later obtained by investigators, he deposited the money into his business account at SunTrust Bank. At 2:14 p.m. that same day, surveillance footage from the bank's ATM vestibule shows Peter withdrawing $3,000 in cash. He's wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. He smiles at the camera, unaware it would become one of the last clear images of him alive. What Peter didn't know was that 3 people in his inner circle had been watching his accounts. 3 people he trusted. 3 people who would later be identified as Darius Cole, 27, Peter's childhood best friend and employee, Jamal Winters, 31, Peter's cousin and business partner, and Trayvon Hughes, 26, another employee and frequent companion. By mid-September, tensions had begun to simmer. On September 10, 2019, a doorbell camera at Peter's townhouse captured an argument. The timestamp reads 9:32 p.m. Peter stands in the doorway, arms crossed. Darius and Jamal are visible on the porch, their voices raised. The audio is muffled, but investigators later enhanced the recording. You can hear fragments. "You promised us a cut, Peter. I said when the job is done. We need that money now, man." Peter shakes his head, closes the door. For days later he would be dead. September 14, 2019 began like any other day for Peter Vincent. At 7:48 a.m. his phone's GPS data, later extracted by forensic analysts, shows him leaving his townhouse on Edgewood Avenue. He drives to a hardware store on Phillips Highway, where security footage captures him purchasing lumber, power tools, and paint supplies. Total cost: $1,247.53. At 11:06 a.m., he arrives at the downtown construction site. Workers are already there. The cameras installed by the property owner for security purposes show Peter moving in and out of frame throughout the day, checking materials, directing his crew, making phone calls. But at 5:43 p.m. something changes. Peter receives a text message. Investigators would later recover the full conversation from his phone's cloud backup. Darius Cole, 5:43 p.m. Yo, we need to talk. Tonight. It's important. Peter, 5:45 p.m. About what? Darius, 5:46 p.m. The money. And the business. Meet us at the warehouse. 10:30. Don't bring nobody else. Peter hesitates. Doesn't respond for 20 minutes. Peter, 6:06 p.m. I'll be there. At 6:52 p.m., Peter leaves the construction site. Traffic camera footage along Interstate 95 captures his black Dodge Ram pickup truck heading north toward the Arlington area. At 8:14 p.m., he stops at a Wendy's drive-thru, purchases a burger, fries, and a Coke. The receipt is later found in his truck. At 9:47 p.m., his phone pings off a cell tower near Moncrief Road, a largely industrial area dotted with warehouses, auto shops, and abandoned lots. At 10:22 p.m., a motion-activated security camera mounted on the exterior of Ace Industrial Storage, a warehouse facility on Lenox Avenue, captures Peter's truck pulling into the gravel lot. The footage is poor quality. Sodium lights cast harsh shadows, but you can see the truck parked near the south entrance. At 10:29 p.m., three figures emerge from a side door of the warehouse. They walk toward Peter's truck. Here's what we know happened next and what we don't. At 10:31 p.m., the warehouse camera captures Peter stepping out of his truck. He's holding his phone in one hand. The three figures, later identified as Darius Cole, Jamal Winters, and Trayvon Hughes, approach him. They talk. The conversation appears calm at first. Peter gestures with his hands. Darius shakes his head. At 10:33 p.m., the body language changes. Jamal steps closer. Peter takes a step back. Darius raises his voice. You can see his mouth moving rapidly, though the camera has no audio. At 10:34 p.m., Peter turns away, as if to get back in his truck. And then the camera feed cuts out. What no one realized was that another camera was already recording. A traffic camera positioned 200 feet away at the intersection of Lenox Avenue and Moncrief Road, installed by the city to monitor illegal dumping, had a partial view of the warehouse lot. The angle is poor. The image is pixelated, but forensic video analysts later enhanced the footage frame by frame. At 10:35 p.m., you can see movement. Dark shapes against the gravel. A struggle. At 10:36 p.m., Peter falls. At 10:37 p.m., the three figures are seen dragging someone, toward the warehouse entrance. Peter Vincent's phone falls from his pocket. It lands near the curb, just outside the camera's view. At 10:52 p.m., the warehouse camera comes back online. Investigators would later determine the feed had been manually disabled. Someone inside the building had unplugged the recording unit. By the time the camera resumed recording, the lot was empty. Peter's truck was still there. Engine off. Driver's door open. But Peter was gone. At 11:47 p.m., exactly 1 hour and 11 minutes after Peter was last seen alive, Nicole Brennan picked up his phone in the Riverside Plaza parking lot, more than 4 miles away from the warehouse. How did it get there? That question would haunt investigators for weeks. Nicole would later tell detectives she had no idea the phone was connected to a crime. She said she tried to unlock it, hoping to find a contact labeled Mom or Home to return it, but the phone was password protected. At 11:58 p.m., surveillance footage from inside the convenience store shows Nicole purchasing a bag of chips and a bottle of water. She places the phone on the counter while paying. The clerk doesn't notice. At 12:04 a.m., now September 15th, Nicole leaves the store and drives home to her apartment in the Mandarin neighborhood. She plugs the phone into a charger, decides she'll try to return it in the morning. She goes to bed. By the time she woke up, police were already looking for that phone, and for the man who owned it. At 6:42 a.m. on September 15, 2019, Diane Vincent called the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office to report her son missing. Peter had promised to stop by her house the night before to drop off groceries. He never showed up. His phone went straight to voicemail. At 9:15 a.m., a patrol officer located Peter's truck in the warehouse lot on Lenox Avenue. The keys were still in the ignition. His wallet was in the center console, but there was no sign of Peter. At 10:03 a.m., detectives arrived on scene. They reviewed the warehouse security footage. They saw the confrontation. They saw Peter fall. But the critical moments, what happened between 10:34 p.m. and 10:52 p.m., were missing. At 11:27 a.m., a K-9 unit was deployed. The dogs tracked Peter sent from the parking lot to the warehouse entrance, and then inside. At 12:14 p.m., investigators discovered blood spatter on the concrete floor near a loading dock. DNA testing would later confirm it belonged to Peter Vincent. But there was no body. At 1:30 p.m., detectives obtained phone records for Peter, Darius, Jamal, and Trayvon. The record showed all 4 phones had pinged off the same cell tower near the warehouse between 10 p.m. and 10:45 p.m. But there was something else. Peter's phone had continued to transmit data after the attack. At 11:23 p.m., his phone pinged off a tower near Interstate 95 and University Boulevard, miles from the warehouse. At 11:41 p.m., it pinged again near Riverside Plaza. At 11:52 p.m., the phone connected to a Wi-Fi network registered to Nicole Brennan's apartment complex. Detectives didn't know who Nicole was yet, but they knew someone had Peter's phone, and that person was now a suspect. At 7:18 a.m. on September 16, 2019, 2 days after Peter disappeared, Nicole Brennan was getting her kids ready for school when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find 2 Jacksonville Sheriff's Office detectives standing on her doorstep. "Ma'am, we need to talk to you about a phone." Nicole's doorbell camera captured the entire interaction. In the footage, you can see her face change from confusion to alarm. "What phone?" she asks. "An iPhone 11 Pro Max Rose Gold. We have reason to believe you're in possession of it." Nicole hesitates, then nods. "I found it. In a parking lot. 2 nights ago. I was going to turn it in, I swear." The detectives ask her to retrieve the phone. Nicole disappears inside, returns a moment later holding the device. One of the detectives takes it, places it in an evidence bag. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come down to the station and answer some questions." "Am I in trouble?" The detective doesn't answer directly. "We just need to talk." At 9:45 a.m., Nicole sat in an interrogation room at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office headquarters. The room was small, windowless, with a table bolted to the floor and a camera mounted in the corner. 2 detectives, Detective Laura Simmons and Detective Marcus Grant, sat across from her. The interview lasted 3 hours. Nicole told them everything. The parking lot, the phone, the convenience store, the decision to keep it overnight. But the detectives weren't convinced. "You expect us to believe you just found this phone?" Detective Simmons asked. "In a random parking lot? For miles from where the owner was last seen?" "Yes," Nicole said, her voice shaking. "I don't know anything about the owner. I don't even know his name." "His name was Peter Vincent," Detective Grant said. "And he's been missing for 2 days." Nicole's face went pale. "Missing? We have reason to believe he was the victim of foul play. And right now, you're the last known person to have possession of his property." "I didn't do anything," Nicole insisted. "I found the phone. That's it." "Then explain how it ended up in that parking lot," Detective Simmons said. "Because the last place it pinged before you picked it up was at a warehouse where Peter was attacked." Nicole had no answer. At 1:22 p.m., Nicole was released, but only after detectives obtained a warrant to search her apartment, her car, and her phone records. She wasn't arrested, but she wasn't cleared either. For the next 6 days, Nicole Brennan lived under a cloud of suspicion. A woman who had made the mistake of picking up the wrong phone at the wrong time. What no one realized was that the real killers were still out there, and they were about to make a fatal mistake. On September 22, 2019, 8 days after Peter disappeared, a maintenance worker at the Ace Industrial Storage Warehouse noticed a foul smell coming from a storage unit in the back of the building. Unit 47C had been rented 3 months earlier under the name of a shell company called Apex Logistics, LLC. The rental agreement listed Trayvon Hughes as the authorized key holder. At 10:38 a.m., the maintenance worker unlocked the unit. The smell hit him immediately. Inside, wrapped in plastic tarps and duct tape, was the body of Peter Tyrell Vincent. The medical examiner's report, filed on September 24, determined Peter had died from blunt force trauma to the head and multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. Time of death, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. on September 14. The manner of death, homicide. Investigators processed the storage unit for evidence. They found blood spatter consistent with a violent struggle, a crowbar with Peter's DNA, a cell phone, not Peter's, registered to Darius Cole, receipts from a hardware store showing Darius had purchased plastic tarps, duct tape, and bleach on September 13th, one day before the murder. But here's where the case took a turn. Forensic analysts examining Peter's phone discovered something critical. At 11:19 p.m. on September 14th, after Peter had been killed, his phone received a text message from an unknown number. "Where you at? We waiting." At 11:23 p.m., someone replied from Peter's phone. "On my way. 5 minutes." The message was sent to create an alibi, to make it look like Peter was still alive. But the killers made a mistake. While driving away from the warehouse, Trayvon Hughes, who had taken Peter's phone to dispose of it, dropped it near Riverside Plaza. Nicole Brennan picked it up 47 minutes later. By September 23rd, investigators had pieced together the timeline. Security footage from a gas station 3 miles from the warehouse showed Trayvon Hughes's car at 11:15 p.m. on September 14th, driving erratically, heading toward Riverside Plaza. Traffic cameras tracked the vehicle's route. At 11:32 p.m., the car was captured on camera near the shopping center where Nicole would find the phone 15 minutes later. Detectives believe Trayvon had thrown the phone out the window while driving, trying to get rid of evidence. It landed in the parking lot. By pure chance, Nicole found it. But for investigators, there was still one critical question. Where were Darius, Jamal, and Trayvon now? Phone records showed all 3 men's phones had gone dark after September 15th. No calls, no texts, no location data. They had fled. While police hunted for the real killers, Nicole Brennan's life was falling apart. On September 18th, local news reported that a person of interest had been questioned in connection with Peter Vincent's disappearance. Though Nicole wasn't named, neighbors recognized the police cars that had been parked outside her apartment. Rumors spread. On September 20th, Nicole's employer, a dental practice where she'd worked for 6 years, placed her on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Her children were questioned at school. Other parents whispered. Friends stopped returning calls. Nicole was innocent. But in the court of public opinion, she was already guilty. In an interview conducted weeks later, Nicole described those days as the worst of my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time someone looked at me, I thought they believed I was a murderer. I kept telling myself the truth would come out. But part of me wondered, what if they never find the real killers? What if I go to prison for something I didn't do? The surveillance footage had documented her finding the phone. But it couldn't prove her innocence. Only finding Peter's real killers could do that. On September 23, 2019, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office issued arrest warrants for Darius Cole, first-degree murder; Jamal Winters, first-degree murder; conspiracy; Trayvon Hughes, first-degree murder; conspiracy; tampering with evidence. All 3 men were considered armed and dangerous. At 4:17 p.m., a Bolo be on the lookout alert was issued across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. At 6:52 p.m., a traffic camera on Interstate 10 near Tallahassee captured Darius's silver Nissan Altima heading west toward Alabama. At 8:04 p.m., Alabama State Police located the vehicle at a gas station outside Mobile. Darius was arrested without incident. Jamal Winters was in the passenger seat. But Trayvon Hughes wasn't with them. Trayvon had gone south. On September 25th, U.S. Marshals tracked him to a motel outside Tampa. At 11:43 p.m., a team of deputies surrounded the building. Trayvon tried to run. Bodycam footage from one of the deputies shows the chase. Trayvon sprinting through the parking lot, jumping a fence, cutting through a residential yard. At 11:51 p.m., he was tackled and restrained. "You got the wrong guy," he screamed into the pavement. "I didn't do nothing." But investigators already had the evidence. All 3 men were in custody, and Nicole Brennan could finally breathe. The cameras captured everything, but they couldn't save Peter Vincent. They couldn't protect Nicole Brennan from suspicion, and they almost let 3 killers escape. What happens next will shock you. In part 2 you'll see The explosive courtroom trial where surveillance footage becomes the star witness Nicole Brennan's emotional testimony about the 6 days she spent as a murder suspect the moment Diane Vincent, Peter's mother, comes face to face with her son's killers, the jury's verdict that will determine whether justice is served, and the haunting final footage that proves, by the time the cameras told the truth, it was already too late. This case will leave you questioning everything you think you know about surveillance, justice, and the price of doing the right thing. Red circle subscribe now to watch part 2 and see how this true crime story ends. Backhand index pointing down, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the shocking conclusion, the final discovery, the trial, the verdict, the aftermath. Part 2 drops soon. You won't want to miss it. Warning: this is a true story. Real people. Real surveillance footage. Real consequences. See you in part 2.